Professor Brain Brown's research shows that vulnerability fosters good emotional and mental health. It is a sign of courage. We become more resilient and brave when we embrace who we truly are and what we are feeling. The Vulnerable Scientist podcast is a space for scientists to tell their honest and authentic stories. I am your host, Sarah Nyakeri, who happens to be a scientist, informal science communicator, and I help scientists create personal websites. If you want to support this show, go to www.patreon.com/thevulnerable-scientist. You can also follow this podcast on all social media platforms at TV Scientist Pod.
Yeah, so I think that was like one of the driving factors was, okay, like I can get the same quality of education in Europe, but for like a tenth of the price. So this was one of the main...
How much cheaper was it? Oh, 10th. Wow.
Like, yeah, I mean, it depends on the country, right? In the schools, but like, yeah.
Okay.
Continental Europe, it's typically much cheaper than the UK or the US for master's programs. With the cheapest being like probably the Netherlands or Germany. That would be my guess. And then, yeah, so I think there's a lot of opportunities to get like high quality education in continental Europe. Rather than the US or the UK.
Okay.
And for economics, at least, most of the programs are taught in English, so it's not a problem.
Yeah. All right. So, this research assistant position that you are in World Bank, what do you want to talk about? That what you are doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't doing the most exciting work. I was part of the global. If we're being honest,
Why was it exciting?
So this was in 2016. And if you remember in 2016, the refugee crisis was a bit at its peak. And like a lot of the public opinion, public discourse was surrounding refugees and integrating them into host countries. So I think at the time there were like 65 million displaced people worldwide. And World Bank was putting together a report on essentially the global status of refugees and internally displaced people. The terminology being refugees are people who flee from conflict and leave the country, and internally displaced are people who flee from conflict and stay in the country. World Bank was writing a report on that, and at the same time, UNHCR, the UN Agency for Refugees, was releasing new data. So my job was to go through the report and update all of the numbers with the new data. And this is why I say, like, I mean, it was an exciting project in terms of like the report was very interesting. And it was on a very hot topic and a very important topic. But yeah, I was updating numbers in a report at the end of the day. Even then, I mean, I still learned a lot because, I mean, I learned, how people there were writing their reports. I mean, what was relevant, what was not relevant, learning how people think about all the public, let's say, public interests that are influencing these dialogues. So I think, even then, it was a very good experience. Yeah.
Okay, nice. So, what made you now want to do a master's? Like, what is that thing that made you think now? I think it's time I do a master's. And what did you do your master's on?
So I think I had already developed an interest in research, and I mean, my motivation was very practical. I was looking at jobs that I wanted, that I think that I would have found interesting, research positions, looking at the topics I wanted to, and I was looking at all these positions, and they all required master's degrees. So the equation was very simple for me. Like, okay, if those are the jobs I want, then I need a master's. And yeah, that was the driving force behind it.
Motivation. Okay. And what did you do your master's on?
So the master's is a mouthful. It was a master's in specialized. Yeah, they really need a new degree title for this. It was a master's in specialized economic analysis, focusing on international trade, finance, and development.
Okay.
So essentially, it was a master's in international economics, looking at some trade components, some development components, a little bit of finance. So there was a variety of topics there. But the master's was the theme underlying all of it was like very quantitative economic analysis. So it was a lot of diving into economic models, deriving economic equations. So yeah, it was a quantitative master's in broadly international economics. I was just gonna say the environment of it was very cool because it had a very international feel. There's people from all over the world coming together, and so it made for a very exciting environment. And it was also quite intense, so we didn't have much else to do, so we everybody bonded very well. Everybody, So I think it was a very nice experience. But yeah, what was it on? So the courses varied. So in the beginning, everybody had to take the same 3 courses in the first term, which were on economic trade models, mostly theoretical models, econometric models, econometrics is just essentially statistics applied to economic analysis. I would say the distinguishing feature is usually in econometric analysis where we're concerned with causal effects rather than prediction. But yeah, and then the economic theory of growth, of economic growth.
What is that?
Yeah, so this is...
Okay, so, sorry. So for someone who doesn't understand this whole economy thing, what is that?
So the economics of growth is simply how do countries become richer? That's the... perhaps put in a very blunt way, but that's what we're interested in. Over the years, many different theories have been developed of why some countries are rich, why some countries are poor, and then the more practical question is, okay, we can't go back and change the past, so how do poor countries now become rich? And that's the big question. And so, a lot of economists have developed theoretical models to study this. And funny enough, I'm not an economic growth expert, but I mean, the models that we're learning are, from the 60s and 70s. The thinking hasn't really evolved a whole lot. Now, I say that, but I mean, there's hundreds, thousands of growth economists working on this who will absolutely disagree with me.
Okay.
But I mean, the models we're learning, everybody learns these standard models that were developed in the 60s and 70s and so on. These are the underlying core economic theories you learn first, and then the fancier things are for researchers, not master students. I would say. I don't know if this is relevant. I don't think so. But,
Okay. So what after the classes? Everything is relevant. So after the classes, what did you do a research on?
Yeah, so we had to do a master's thesis, and this was on I did it with a few other students, and we wrote about child labor laws in Colombia. Colombia had passed a law restricting children under 13, essentially making it illegal for them to work. And so we wanted to understand what kind of impacts does passing such a law have on the children, on their development process, and what kind of economic impacts does that have, say, for family farms and things like this. So this is what we were researching. And we are
Wait, so for example, for that topic, what exactly would you be doing? Like, take me through a typical day as a master student doing this research. What will you be doing? What will you be essentially doing?
Yeah, so
for example, for that topic.
Yeah, so a typical day, I mean, for that topic, we had a few secondary data sets from the Colombian government. And so first you need to take the data set, and some people call it data wrangling, some people call it data manipulation. I don't like that one because it sounds bad. But basically you just take the data and you have to work it into a usable format. Create the variables that you want that are of interest, because most of this data is coming from household surveys. So yeah, in household surveys, you sit down with the household, you talk to them for 2 hours. We weren't doing that. We were using secondary data. But then, you have to take all of this. Okay, so how many kids do you have? Are they in school? Do they work on the farm? Do they do this? What's your household income? How much do you? Yeah, so there's all these questions that are asked to the households, and then we need to put those into indicators and variables that you can plug into a statistical model. So what's funny is you spend a lot of your time doing this, and nobody will ever see it in the paper, and you get judged on the statistical models that you run in the paper, but from a coding perspective, the statistical model is only a line of code. So a lot of the work is actually just going into getting the data ready for analysis. So yeah, then once we do that, it's writing and producing all of the tables, making sure they make sense, tweaking the statistical model to make sure that it's consistent. Yeah, all of this. So I would say that's the typical day. We tried to, we were a team, so we tried to divide the labor up a little bit. So those of us who were better at data wrangling, we did that, and then there were some people who were better at writing. So yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
So that was nice.
That makes things easier, right?
For sure, for sure. And PhD research has been very different. Not as much division of labor.
You do everything. You do everything.
Yeah. Not quite everything. I mean, there's co-authors, but I think in the PhD you're expected to be first author, and you're expected to show that you can be an independent researcher. So even with co-authors, there's an expectation that you. It depends on the agreement, of course, but that you carry the weight. And also, you're training to be an independent researcher, so you want to, right? Where I did at least. I wanted to take charge of it all and say, okay, yes, this is something I can do. I don't want to graduate with a PhD and feel like I can't run a research project. This would mean I didn't learn what I was supposed to.
To be learning.
So yeah, in that sense, it's a bit different.
So, for example, for that masters, which part did you play? Like, which were you strong at? Like, did you enjoy? What part of research did you enjoy?
I like playing with data. Completely. This is my favorite. This is my favorite thing to do. Even nowadays, I love it when I get a break from writing and I can just sit down and like play with data for a day. This is my yeah. This is what I like doing.
Okay, so which tools do you use for someone who might be asking?
Stata. Stata is like the de facto software for economists. Okay, let me rephrase that. For microeconomists. For financial macroeconomists, they use a lot of R, which I also use sometimes because R is very strong with geospatial analysis. And it's much easier to work with shape files and raster data sets with R. And then I'll use Python if there's some sort of weird functionality that I need. Maybe I need to
weird functionality.
Yeah, like if it's an obscure thing that needs to be done, I always go to Python because Python is like fantastic for obscure functionality. Like, and to me, obscure is like reading PDF. Like, oh, I need to pick out all of the words in like a PDF document or something. Then I just go to Python, and stuff like that is much better than. I think it's virtually impossible in Stata. It's very clunky in R, but in Python, it's like it's very easy. So now I would say I use a combination of tools, mostly Stata, R for spatial analysis, and Python for obscure things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's good to know what kind of a person you are in terms of the tools that you use. All right. So, what did you do after your masters?
After my masters, I went to work.
Wait, sorry.
No worries.
Sorry. About the research that you did in about the Colombia kids being told not to work anymore.
Yeah.
Do you want to share the results for that?
Not really.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna say anything definitive because honestly, I don't. I'm not a fan of like the methodology that we used, and I'm not sure that I believe our results. So, like, I wouldn't say this is the most rigorous piece of work. But yeah, I mean, we did find that the children we did like a cohort analysis, so we compared because the law was passed and it was passed for everyone in the country. And for this type of research, you need a comparison group. You can't make conclusions if you don't have a control group. So we did like a cohort analysis where we compared, like, say they pass the law and it takes effect today, then the 13 and 14-year-olds won't be affected by it because the law's already been passed. The 11 and 12-year-olds will be affected by it. So these are like the two cohorts of children we studied. And yeah, we did find some slight improvements in educational outcomes and higher incomes later on in life for the children who went to school. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I don't fully believe these results. If we're being honest.
I love that you said that.